Mark sat alone in the quiet of his living room, the soft hum of the ceiling fan the only sound filling the space. Outside, the evening sky had turned a deep shade of purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear, tiny pinpricks of light against the dark canvas. He sipped his coffee slowly, but it had gone cold long ago. The warmth had left, leaving behind only a hollow sense of waiting. It had been a long week. Work had been relentless, deadlines pressing, and meetings stretching late into the night. Yet none of that weighed as heavily on him as the emptiness he sometimes felt at home. He glanced at the family photos lining the mantel, me smiling brightly on their wedding day. Their dog Max tilting his head at the camera, laughter frozen in time. Everything looked perfect. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, and yet something had shifted. Mark couldn't quite put his finger on it. But lately, there was a quiet distance between him and Emily. It wasn't anger or disagreement. There had been none of that. Just a subtle pull, a gentle space that he couldn't bridge. He longed for their old spontaneity, the way they used to share inside jokes in the middle of the kitchen, or dance aimlessly in the living room late at night. Those moments felt like whispers from a memory he was struggling to reach. He set the cup down and leaned back into the worn leather of the couch, staring at the ceiling. He wondered if Emily felt it too, this quiet, unspoken drift in their routine. He wanted to ask to start a conversation that might uncover what was missing, but fear held him back. What if he imagined it? What if it was nothing at all, and he brought worry where there was none? A soft click from the front door snapped him from his thoughts. Emily had arrived home, her familiar presence filling the air with the faint scent of jasmine from her perfume. Mark's heart lifted slightly. There she was, smiling gently, carrying her bag as if she hadn't noticed his lingering stare. "Hey," she said softly, hanging up her coat. "Long day." "Yeah," Mark replied, forcing a smile. "You too?" Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful, almost distant. She placed her bag on the counter and leaned against it for a moment, staring out the window at the darkening sky. Mark watched her, sensing a mixture of excitement and unease in her posture. Something had changed, and he didn't yet understand what it was. "Mark." She began, hesitating, as though weighing her words carefully. "I met Laura today." Mark felt a flicker of curiosity. Laura was Emily's friend who had gone through a difficult divorce the previous year. She was outspoken, confident, and full of opinions about life and love. He didn't mind her. They had met at dinner parties and shared polite conversations, but Mark had always sensed that Laura had a way of planting ideas that lingered longer than intended. "And?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Emily smiled almost nervously. "She gave me some advice. About us. About our marriage." Mark's chest tightened slightly. He forced a laugh, hoping it sounded light. "Advice from Laura." "Yes," Emily said, a soft blush rising in her cheeks. She said, "Sometimes couples need to try new things to keep the spark alive, to remember why they fell in love in the first place." Mark's mind raced. He understood the sentiment, of course. He loved Emily deeply, and he wanted their marriage to flourish. But hearing it framed this way, from someone else's perspective, left him unsettled. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. Emily's eyes met his, warm yet hesitant. I don't know. Maybe she's right. Maybe we've gotten too comfortable, too predictable. I love you, Mark. I really do. I want us to feel alive again." Mark swallowed. The words hit him harder than he expected. He loved her. He always had, but the thought that something in their life together might be missing made him feel vulnerable in a way he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything was perfect. But the truth was, he had felt it too, the subtle loneliness, the quiet longing for a deeper connection. "I love you too, Emily," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "We'll figure this out. Together." Emily smiled, a small but genuine curve of her lips. She moved closer and rested her hand on his shoulder. For a moment, the tension eased. The familiar warmth of her touch reminded him why he had chosen her, why he had built a life with her. And yet, a quiet question lingered in the back of his mind. What exactly did Laura mean by trying new things? And what would it mean for them? Mark didn't have an answer. All he could do was hold on to Emily, letting the evening stretch around them like a protective cocoon. Outside, the first stars twinkled brighter now, and a soft wind whispered through the trees. Something was coming a change. A turning point. Mark felt it deep in his chest. But for tonight, he let himself hope. For now, all that mattered was Emily's presence, the quiet hum of their home, and the fragile skate. Beautiful possibility of rediscovery. Mark sat at the kitchen table the next morning, watching the sunlight spill across the floor. The warmth of the sun reminded him of countless mornings in the past days when he and Emily had lingered over coffee, sharing dreams and plans that seemed endless and effortless. He remembered the first time they had cooked breakfast together in this very kitchen, laughing as they burned pancakes and spilled orange juice. Those memories were a gentle ache now, a reminder of the closeness that had always been there, even in moments of silence. Mark thought of the nights they had stayed up talking for hours, sharing fears, ambitions, and stories from their childhoods. Emily had a way of making ordinary moments feel magical, her laughter, her thoughtful pauses. The way she would tilt her head when she was curious or amused. It was in these small, tender moments that Mark realized their bond had been built slowly, carefully, like a mosaic made of shared experiences. Every conversation, every quiet gesture had created a pattern that connected their hearts. He thought of the rainy afternoon when he had driven 2 hours just to bring her favorite flowers after a bad day at work. Or the time Emily had stayed up late sewing a blanket for their first apartment, insisting that every stitch carried her love. Yet amid all these memories, Mark also remembered the moments that had kept them apart. Life, with its pressures and distractions, had sometimes created invisible walls between them. Long hours at work, late nights, misunderstandings that went unspoken all had quietly chipped away at the spontaneity they once shared. They were still close, still in love. But there was a rhythm to their life that left little room for surprise or adventure. As Mark stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, he thought about the way Emily had changed since meeting Laura. Perhaps this was the spark. She had been seeking a gentle nudge to remind them both of what they had once felt. And yet Mark felt a pang of fear. He loved her deeply, but change could be complicated. Even when it came wrapped in good intentions. He remembered the day they had met years ago at a mutual friend's party. Emily had been wearing a bright blue dress that made her eyes shine, and she had laughed at a joke he hadn't even understood. Mark had felt an instant connection, as though a part of his soul recognized hers. From that moment, their friendship had blossomed into love. Slow and steady, grounded in mutual respect and quiet admiration. The memories flooded back long walks in the park, sitting on the curbside sharing ice cream cones, discovering hidden bookshops in the city, and late-night drives with no destination. These weren't grand gestures, but they were the foundation of something enduring. Mark realized that even now, with distance creeping in, the bond they had formed was strong enough to survive doubts and fears. He smiled softly, recalling the times when Emily had confided her deepest worries to him. How she had shared her dreams of traveling, of writing a book, of building a family. And he had listened, offering encouragement and comfort. It had always been a partnership built on trust. Even when the world around them seemed uncertain, Mark's thoughts drifted to the subtle ways. Emily had always expressed love notes tucked in his briefcase, gentle hugs when he returned home, her quiet presence at the end of a long day. These small acts were more powerful than grand gestures, reminders of the deep emotional intimacy they shared. Yet even as he remembered the closeness, he acknowledged the silence that had grown in recent months. They had stopped sharing those long, meandering conversations that once left them both feeling lighter and understood. Responsibilities had piled up, and with them, a sense of routine that dulled the spontaneity they had once cherished. That quiet distance now seemed amplified by Emily's recent suggestions and newfound energy. Mark realized that this moment, this quiet, reflective morning, was a chance to reconnect. to remember why they had chosen each other and why the love they shared was worth nurturing. Perhaps the past wasn't just a series of memories. It was a roadmap to the future, showing them what they needed to preserve and cherish. He reached for his phone and typed a quick message to Emily. "Can we take a walk this evening? Just us. I want to talk and remember why we're here together." When Emily replied with a simple, warm-eyed love that, Mark felt a spark of hope. It was small, but it was enough to remind him that love wasn't just about grand declarations. It was about presence, understanding, and the quiet reassurance that comes from truly knowing someone. That evening, as they walked side by side under the golden glow of the setting sun, Mark let himself linger in the past without judgment, letting the memories wash over him. He listened to Emily. He weekend arrived quietly, with the city streets bathed in the soft glow of morning light. Mark and Emily had decided to take a short drive to a nearby park just to escape the weight of their routines and reconnect. The car hummed steadily along the winding roads, the familiar scenery passing by like a comforting memory. Mark glanced at Emily, who was staring out the window, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her coffee cup. There was something in her gaze, a mixture of thoughtfulness and anticipation, that made his heart beat a little faster. He wondered if she felt the same pull he did, the quiet longing to rekindle the closeness that had always defined their relationship. They arrived at the park just as the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the paths lined with maple trees. The crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves, and the faint laughter of children playing in the distance made the world feel alive and gentle. "Remember when we used to come here?" Emily asked softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Mark smiled. "Of course. We had that silly competition to see who could skip the most stones across the pond." Emily laughed, a sound that warmed Mark in a way nothing else could. "And you always won because you practiced secretly the day before." He laughed along with her, shaking his head. "I only won because I had a little patience. You were too kind to compete seriously." The memory sparked something in both of them, a reminder of the playfulness and joy they had once shared without thought or worry. For a moment, the tension that had built in recent weeks melted away, replaced by laughter, shared stories, and the quiet comfort of being together as they walked along the edge of the pond. A sudden gust of wind scattered a pile of leaves into the air. Emily squealed in delight as the golden leaves swirled around them. Mark reached out instinctively to steady her, and their hands met, fingers brushing lightly. A spark of connection passed between them, simple yet profound, as if the universe itself had orchestrated the moment to remind them of their bond. They found a bench beneath an old oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching wide like arms embracing the sky. Sitting side by side, they watched the sun sink lower, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange. Mark felt an unfamiliar nervousness. This wasn't the casual walk they had imagined. There was something more beneath the surface, a shift that neither of them could deny. "Mark," Emily began, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking about us, about how much I miss us." Mark turned to her, searching her face. Her eyes were glistening, the faint shimmer of tears caught in the fading sunlight. "I miss it too," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I miss the way we used to feel so connected, so alive." Emily's hand found his again, and this time they didn't let go. The simple touch carried the weight of months of longing, worry, and unspoken feelings. It wasn't dramatic or show yet, was a quiet acknowledgement that, despite the distance and the small changes in their lives, the heart of their relationship was still there, steady and strong. They talked, then really talked, about the little cracks that had appeared in their connection, the stress, the routines, the subtle ways they had drifted apart without noticing. There were no accusations, no blame, just honesty and the recognition that love sometimes needed attention to flourish. At one point, a small bird landed on the branch above them, singing a soft, almost hesitant melody. Emily smiled, watching it hop along the branch. "It's funny," she said, "how something so small can make you notice what you've been missing." Mark nodded, understanding immediately. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic events. It was the small things, the moments of shared presence, the quiet ways they reminded each other that they mattered. This simple walk, this fleeting encounter with a bird, the swirl of autumn leaves, it was enough to reignite a connection that had never truly disappeared as the sun disappeared completely behind the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and soft indigos. Mark realized how fragile and precious their bond was. He had spent so long worrying about the future, about what might be missing, that he had almost forgotten the power of the present moment. Emily leaned her head lightly on his shoulder, and Mark rested his cheek against her hair. "I think we're stronger than we think," she whispered. "We are," he replied. And for the first time in weeks, Mark felt that surge of hope. He had been waiting for the hope that love, when nurtured and remembered, could withstand time, distance, and uncertainty. The evening drew on, and they walked back to the car in silence, comfortable and content. The world around them was quiet now, the park bathed in the gentle glow of street lamps. And though they didn't know exactly what the future held, Mark and Emily had rediscovered something vital, the emotional connection that had always been at the heart of their love, waiting patiently for them to notice again. That night, as Mark lay in bed, he thought about the simple magic of the datha leaves, the bird. Emily's hand in his hand felt something he hadn't in a long time, a deep, unshakable certainty that no matter what twists life might bring, their bond was real, enduring, and worth every effort to protect and cherish. The days after their walk in the park were filled with a quiet tension, soft but persistent, that neither Mark nor Emily could fully name. They returned to their routines, to work and errands, to the small responsibilities that filled every day. Yet beneath the surface, a subtle shift lingered. Invisible but undeniably pull between what had been said and what had not. Mark noticed it first at breakfast one morning. Emily poured coffee with her usual care, but her smile seemed tinged with hesitation. Her eyes met his briefly and then darted away, as though she feared revealing the thoughts that had settled in her heart. He wanted to reach across the table to bridge the gap that had grown in moments of unspoken longing, but he hesitated. Words felt fragile, easily misunderstood. He remembered the park, the swirl of autumn leaves, the brush of her hand against his. Those moments had sparked something tender, a reminder of the closeness they had once shared, but they had also revealed the quiet distance that had grown over time. And now, with Emily so near, he realized how much he had yearned for a simple admission from her, from himself, of the feelings they had both buried under routine and silence. "Mark," Emily said suddenly, breaking the stillness, "do you ever feel that we're not saying what we really feel?" He looked at her, his coffee forgotten. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, and it stirred something deep inside him. "I do," he admitted. "Sometimes I think we're both afraid of changing things, afraid of being honest." She nodded slowly, biting her lower lip. "I've been thinking about how much I miss the way we used to talk, the way we used to feel close without even trying. And I didn't realize how much I let the little things slide." Mark reached across the table and took her hand gently. The contact was warm, grounding, but it wasn't dramatic. It was enough to say without words that he understood, that he had felt it too. "I've missed it as well," he said. "I didn't know how to bring it up, how to tell you that I felt a little lonely sometimes, but not lonely because of you. Lonely because I didn't know how to reach you." Emily's eyes glistened, and she gave a small, almost shy smile. "I guess I've been feeling that too. There's so much I wanted to say, and I didn't. Maybe I thought you'd notice. Or maybe I was afraid it would sound silly." Mark shook his head gently. "It's not silly. It's real, and it matters." For a few moments they sat in silence, their hands intertwined, letting the unspoken truth hang between them. It was the kind of silence that was full of meaning, full of the emotions they had both carried in secret. The longing, the hesitation, the quiet ache of months unaddressed, it was all there. Palpable but tender. Later that evening, Mark found Emily sitting on the couch with a journal in her lap. The room was dim, the soft glow of a lamp creating a circle of light around her. She looked up as he approached, her expression open but cautious. "I've been writing," she admitted softly. "Just thoughts. Feelings I couldn't say out loud." Mark sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "Can I read?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated, then nodded. As he read, he felt the careful honesty of her words. She wrote about missing him, about fearing the distance that had grown between them, about the hope that they could find their way back to each other. There was no blame, no accusations, just raw, tender truth captured in quiet. Thoughtful phrases. Mark's throat tightened. He realized how often he had assumed she didn't feel the same uncertainty he had. How often he had misread her quietness as contentment when it had been longing. He wanted to tell her how deeply he understood, how every word she had written mirrored his own heart. "Emily," he whispered, his hand brushing hers. "I feel all of this too. Every bit. I didn't know how to say it without sounding, I don't know, too serious or silly or something." She leaned into him slightly, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's not silly," she said softly. "It's love, Mark. It's what makes us who we are. And maybe we've just been afraid to let it show." The moment stretched, quiet but full of meaning. Mark felt the weight of months lift, replaced by the fragile hope that honesty could heal what had been quietly strained. He realized that love wasn't always dramatic or flashy. Sometimes it was just sitting beside someone, sharing their fears. And it was a rainy Saturday afternoon when the moment arrived. The soft patter of rain against the windows filled the quiet house, wrapping Mark and Emily in a cocoon of stillness. They had been talking intermittently all morning, revisiting memories, hopes, and the unspoken truths they had slowly begun to share. But there was still one piece of Emily's heart she had kept hidden, a feeling she had carried quietly, unsure how to express it. Mark was in the living room, reorganizing a shelf of old photo albums when Emily appeared in the doorway. Her expression was a mixture of resolve and nervousness, as if she had rehearsed her words 1,000 times in her mind. "Mark," she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I need to tell you something. Something important." Mark set down the photo album and turned to face her, his heart sensing the weight behind her words. "Whatever it is, Emily," he replied gently, "you can tell me. I'm here." She took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I've been thinking a lot about our life, about the choices we've made, and about what I want for our future. I realize now that I've been holding back, letting my fears and outside opinions shape me instead of listening to my heart." Mark felt a lump in his throat. The quiet honesty in her voice, the vulnerability she was showing, reminded him of everything he loved about her. He nodded encouragingly. "Go on," he whispered. Emily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I was influenced by what Laura said, by the idea of making changes just to feel alive. But the truth is, Mark, I don't need anyone to tell me that. I already know what I want. I want our life, our love, and yes, I want to start a family. I want this with you because it's us, not because someone else suggested it." Mark's chest tightened as he absorbed her words. Relief, joy, and a rush of tenderness flooded through him. He had worried that outside influence had shaped their choices, that the intimacy they shared had been diluted by suggestion. And now, hearing her speak her truth, he felt the invisible weight lift. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You don't know how long I've waited to hear that. I've wanted the same thing I've wanted us to decide together, for the right reasons, and not because anyone else told us what to do. I love you, and I want our future to be ours fully and completely." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks as she smiled, a mixture of relief and joy. She reached out, taking his hands in hers. "I've been scared, Mark. Scared that I might push too hard or make the wrong choice. But being honest now, it feels like I can finally breathe, like we can finally move forward without doubt." Mark pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her tightly. For a long moment, they stayed that way, letting the rain outside wash over the world, giving them a sense of quiet intimacy and connection. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of months of longing, hesitation, and unspoken truths. When they finally pulled apart, Emily wiped her cheeks and smiled through her tears. "I know it won't always be easy," she said softly, "but I believe we can face anything as long as we're honest with each other. And right now, I feel like we're finally being honest." Mark nodded, his own emotions raw and open. "Yes," he said, "honesty. That's all we need. Everything else will follow." They spent the rest of the afternoon sitting together, talking openly about their hopes, their fears, and their shared dreams. For the first time in weeks, the barriers that had grown between them seemed to dissolve. Words that had been left unsaid for so long finally found their place. And with them came a sense of clarity and reassurance. Mark found himself thinking about how fragile love could be. And yet how resilient. It didn't require grand gestures or perfection, it required presence, attention, and the courage to speak the truth, even when it felt difficult. Emily's honesty had opened a door, and he felt himself stepping through it alongside her. Hand in hand, as evening fell, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the house was filled with the soft glow of lamps and the quiet comfort of shared space. Mark looked at Emily, her hair damp from a quick dash outside to feel the rain, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "You've given me something I didn't even realize I needed," he said softly. Emily smiled, leaning against him. "And you've given me courage. Courage to be honest, to trust, to love fully without holding back." In that moment, Mark realized that the turning point had arrived not through dramatic events or external forces, but through the quiet act of truth. The honesty they had shared, the vulnerability they had allowed each other, had created a space where their love could grow stronger, more resilient, and more real. For the first time in months, they felt aligned not just as a couple, but as partners in life. The emotional tension, the lingering questions, the subtle fears, they were still there, but they were no longer obstacles. Instead, they were part of the path that had led them to this point. To a renewed sense of connection and hope. As they prepared for dinner that evening, Mark felt a lightness he hadn't known in weeks. The house seemed warmer, the world brighter, and the rain outside sounded like a gentle promise of new beginnings. And as they sat together at the table, sharing quiet laughter and conversation, Mark knew that this turning point, the moment Emily had spoken her truth, was more than just a conversation. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one built on honesty, understanding, and a love that had been tested and proven true. The weeks that followed were gentle, like the soft unfolding of a new season. Mark and Emily carried the honesty of their turning point into every moment, finding joy in small routines and unexpected discoveries. The quiet distance that had once seemed insurmountable had melted, replaced by a renewed sense of closeness and understanding. Each morning, they woke to shared laughter over breakfast, savoring the simple ritual of making coffee together, the aroma filling their kitchen like a promise of comfort. Conversations flowed easily now, unburdened by hesitation, with each word building trust and warmth. The little silences that once carried uncertainty were now filled with the contentment of mutual presence. One crisp afternoon, they decided to revisit the park where they had first reconnected. The leaves were turning shades of amber and gold, and the air carried a hint of winter's approach. Walking side by side, their hands brushed frequently, a natural reflection of the intimacy they had rebuilt. "Remember this spot?" Emily asked, pausing near the old oak tree that had become their quiet sanctuary. Mark smiled. "I do. It feels like the place where we found ourselves again." Emily's eyes glistened. "It's more than that. It's where I realized that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about being honest, being present, and letting each other in." Fully, Mark nodded, feeling the depth of her words. "It's where I understood that everything we went through, the distance, the fears, even the doubts, was part of the journey. And it led us here, together." They sat on a bench beneath the sprawling branches, listening to the wind rustle through the leaves. For a long time, they spoke of dreams for the future, the small things and the big plans. They talked about the family they hoped to build, the trips they wanted to take, and the little moments they wanted to savor along the way. Every conversation felt like a stitch, weaving them closer, reinforcing a bond that had been tested but never broken in those quiet hours. Mark realized that love had a remarkable ability to grow stronger through honesty and vulnerability. The fears and uncertainties of the past had not diminished their connection. They had prepared them to appreciate it more fully, to recognize the depth of the bond they shared. Emily leaned against him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "I never want to take this for granted," she whispered. "I want us to always remember how far we've come and how important it is to be open with each other." Mark kissed the top of her head gently. "Neither do I. I think the Seuss has taught me that the heart is patient, but it also needs courage. Courage to speak, to listen, and to keep trying, even when it feels hard." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of pink and purple, they sat together in a peaceful silence. It was a silence filled with understanding, gratitude, and the quiet excitement of life ahead. The house, the city, the world outside, they all seemed to fade, leaving just the two of them, connected in a way that was tender, profound, and unshakable. When they returned home that evening, Mark noticed how the little things felt different. The way Emily laughed at the small mistakes they made while preparing dinner, the warmth of her hand resting on his as they cleared the table, the shared glances that spoke volumes without a single word. These were the moments that mattered most. Later, as they settled on the couch with mugs of tea, Mark reflected on their journey. They had faced distance, doubt, and the subtle influence of others, yet their love had endured. What had begun as quiet longing had blossomed into a bond strengthened by honesty, trust, and the willingness to face the truth together. Emily rested her head on his shoulder once more, and he felt a sense of completeness he hadn't known in months. "Mark," she said softly, "I think this is the start of something wonderful. Something we'll always remember, not because it was easy, but because we chose each other every step of the way." Mark smiled, holding her close. "Yes, every step. And I wouldn't want it any other way." Outside, the night had settled in, and the city lights shimmered like tiny stars. Inside, the house was warm with th.